People move through their daily routines without questioning the safety of familiar activities. But hidden within these ordinary moments are risks that can turn routine into tragedy. In these 6 cases, normal people performing everyday tasks encountered dangers they never anticipated, with consequences no one could have predicted. It was September 23, 2017, in a residential backyard in Riverside County, California. Most neighbors were inside preparing weekend dinners, unaware that a homemade explosive device was about to detonate in their quiet subdivision. Amanda Reeves, 28, was a part-time bookkeeper at a local CPA firm who was 8 months pregnant with her first child. She had spent the morning getting a pedicure and purchasing thank you cards, arriving at her baby shower at 2 p.m. wearing a simple maternity dress. Amanda had specifically requested nothing elaborate for the event and had no involvement in planning the shower or knowledge of any special activities her brother-in-law had prepared. Amanda understood basic party etiquette and had brought a small gift for the hostess, but she had no experience with gender reveal devices or homemade pyrotechnics. Her focus that afternoon was on visiting with relatives she hadn't seen in months and opening the gifts that had been carefully arranged on a nearby table. She carried no protective equipment and had positioned herself in a standard folding chair, approximately 15 feet from where her brother-in-law would later place his device. The setup that afternoon carried a significant risk due to the improvised nature of the explosive device and Amanda's proximity to the blast zone. Her brother-in-law had constructed a small pipe-based device using YouTube tutorials without professional guidance or safety testing. The device was placed on a small rolling garden cart simply to elevate it off the ground. The backyard layout placed Amanda directly in line with the device's trajectory, and no safety barriers or protective measures had been implemented. Her advanced pregnancy limited her mobility and reaction time if sudden hazards arose. According to witness statements, at 3:30 p.m., Amanda's brother-in-law announced a special surprise while she was opening gifts and speaking with her grandmother. Security footage from a neighboring property shows Amanda remaining seated in her chair, holding a wrapped baby gift, as the cart-mounted device was rolled into position. At 3:32 p.m., the device was triggered, with family members later telling investigators they believed it would only release colored powder. The homemade explosive failed catastrophically, detonating with sufficient force to send metal shrapnel across a 30-foot radius. Amanda was struck by multiple pieces of metal debris while still seated, the largest fragment penetrating her abdomen. Witnesses reported a loud explosion followed by immediate screaming from other guests. Amanda remained conscious initially, as blood soaked through her maternity dress. Emergency responders reached the backyard within 8 minutes and treated Amanda for severe abdominal trauma before rushing her to a nearby trauma center. Surgeons operated for hours to control internal bleeding and delivered her baby through an emergency cesarean section. The infant survived and was placed in intensive care. Amanda suffered repeated complications and went into cardiac arrest at 9:15 p.m. And despite prolonged resuscitation, she was pronounced dead later that night. Investigators later confirmed that excessive propellant caused the device to fail. Her brother-in-law was charged with involuntary manslaughter, and the newborn was released to family custody weeks later. It was March 18, 2016, in a suburban apartment complex in Columbus, Ohio. Most residents were preparing for the weekend, unaware that a structural issue inside apartment 2B was about to trigger a fatal collapse. Years of maintenance patchwork had left sections of the unit's drywall weak, including an old set of anchor holes behind the spot where a previous tenant once mounted a large bookshelf. The repairs looked normal from the surface, but the internal gypsum was brittle and incapable of supporting heavy furniture. Marcus Thompson, 34, was a night shift warehouse supervisor who had recently moved into the apartment to be closer to his children's school. After finishing a 6 a.m. shift, he slept briefly, then spent the afternoon organizing the space for his kids' upcoming weekend visit. By mid-afternoon, he was assembling a 7-foot entertainment center he had purchased second-hand from a coworker, The unit had arrived without its original instructions or mounting hardware, but Marcus had no reason to suspect that the wall he planned to place it against had any hidden weaknesses. The entertainment center's frame was sturdy enough for normal use, but like most tall furniture, it required proper anchoring to prevent forward tipping. Marcus positioned it against the living room wall, unaware that the patched drywall behind it could no longer hold standard fasteners. As he worked, he checked the unit's balance several times. To him, it felt stable. The real hazard lay behind the sheet of painted gypsum, an area weakened by old screws, previous repairs, and moisture damage near the baseboard. According to neighbors, Marcus spent several hours assembling shelves, adjusting panels, and unpacking electronics. Shortly after 6 p.m., he began placing items inside the unit to test weight distribution. He added small boxes to the lower shelves, followed by gaming equipment on the right side. At 6:20 p.m., he lifted his 32-inch television to position it onto an upper compartment designed for display use. The added load shifted the center of gravity forward. At that moment, a neighbor in the adjacent unit slammed her entry door while returning home. The vibration traveled through the shared wall, and the already unstable drywall failed under the pressure of the entertainment center's rear panel. The unit began tipping outward without warning. Marcus instinctively tried to brace it, placing his body directly beneath the collapsing structure. But the combined weight of the wood frame, electronics, and television overpowered him. The entertainment center struck him across the head and upper torso, pinning him to the floor. A neighbor later reported hearing a heavy crash followed by silence. When Marcus did not respond to knocks over the next 2 hours, the apartment manager entered the unit at 8:45 p.m. during a routine welfare check. Marcus was found unconscious beneath the fallen furniture, with debris scattered across the living room. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but he had no detectable vital signs. The coroner later documented severe head trauma and cervical spine fractures as the primary cause of death. An inspection of the apartment confirmed the collapse resulted from structural drywall failure caused by past repairs, not by anything Marcus had done. The entertainment center, though heavy, would have remained stable with intact wall support. His children arrived the following morning to find police tape across the doorway, unaware that a hidden defect in the apartment's wall had caused the accident hours before their visit. It was August 14, 2018, in downtown Portland, Oregon's food truck pod on Southwest 5th Avenue. Office workers moved between trucks during the lunch rush, unaware that a grease fire was about to erupt at one of the dumpling trucks. Melissa Chang, 26, was an office manager at a marketing firm who visited the food truck pod every Tuesday for lunch. She had discovered a small dumpling truck there the previous month and developed a routine of ordering the same soup dumplings around 12:15 p.m. before heading back to work by 1 p.m. Melissa carried her wallet and phone, planning to get her usual order and return to her desk for afternoon meetings. Melissa understood basic food service procedures and had observed the truck's operations during previous visits, but she had no knowledge of commercial kitchen fire hazards or hot oil safety protocols. Her position at the service window placed her approximately 2 feet from the truck's cooking area, where large quantities of oil were heated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit for dumpling preparation. She carried no protective equipment and had positioned herself in the standard customer waiting area directly in front of the service opening. The food preparation that afternoon carried a significant risk due to the truck's cramped cooking space and high-volume oil usage. The elderly owners had been operating with an overloaded fryer that had been showing signs of temperature irregularity throughout the week. The cooking oil had been used beyond recommended cycles, creating a lower flash point and increased fire risk. The hood vent above the fryer had been partially blocked by grease buildup, directing heat and flames forward rather than upward. Melissa's routine positioning placed her directly in line with the service window when the oil reached critical temperature. According to witness statements, Melissa arrived at 12:18 p.m. and placed her standard order while checking her phone. Security footage from a nearby building shows her standing in her usual position at the service window as the truck owners prepared her dumplings. At 12:24 p.m., as one owner quickly dropped a large basket of dumplings into the overheated oil, the oil splashed upward and outward when the basket was dropped too quickly, sending flames toward the service window. The overheated oil ignited on contact with the blocked hood vent, creating a flashover that sent burning oil and flames directly toward Melissa through the service opening. She was struck by splashing hot oil and engulfed in flames, suffering severe burns to her face, neck, and upper torso. Witnesses reported seeing flames shoot from the window as Melissa fell backward onto the pavement, her hair and clothing on fire. Bystanders immediately used jackets and water bottles to extinguish the flames on her body. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and treated Melissa for extensive second and third-degree burns covering roughly a third of her body. She remained conscious as paramedics provided pain control and fluid resuscitation before transporting her to a regional burn center. There, surgeons performed emergency debridement and continued intensive care, including multiple procedures over the next several days. Despite aggressive treatment, she developed severe infection and progressed to sepsis on the fourth day. The coroner later identified thermal injury with secondary sepsis and multi-organ failure as the cause of death. Investigators confirmed overheated oil, and a blocked vent caused the flash fire. The operators of the truck later faced charges for negligent handling and maintenance of commercial cooking equipment. It was November 27, 2015, at a large big-box retail superstore in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hundreds of shoppers gathered in the parking lot before the 6 a.m. opening, unaware that crowd dynamics would soon turn deadly at the store entrance. Dorothy Williams, 52, was a retired school cafeteria worker who rarely participated in Black Friday shopping, but needed to purchase Christmas gifts for her 6 grandchildren on a limited budget. She had seen an advertisement for a $99 television that would fit her budget and arrived at 5 a.m. with a folding chair and a thermos of coffee. Dorothy had no experience with aggressive shopping crowds and expected the event to resemble normal retail operations with additional customers. Dorothy waited near the front of the line with her small purse and folding chair, unaware that the crowd had begun pressing forward as more shoppers arrived behind her. Her position put her directly in the area where the first and strongest push would occur, once the doors opened. The store opening that morning carried significant risk due to the crowd size and narrow entrance layout. Around 400 shoppers had gathered for the early discounts, creating density levels that made movement unpredictable. Temporary barriers had been placed earlier in the night, but the crowd had gradually pushed past them as more people arrived and temperatures dropped. Clusters of shoppers pressed toward the doors for warmth, tightening the front rows. According to witness statements and security footage, Dorothy sat peacefully in her chair until 5:58 a.m., sharing homemade cookies with nearby shoppers and showing photographs of her grandchildren. At 6 a.m., as store employees unlocked the doors, Dorothy stood and began folding her chair in preparation for normal entry. The crowd behind her surged forward with unexpected force as the doors opened. Dorothy was immediately overwhelmed by the pushing and shoving, losing her balance as shoppers rushed past her toward the electronics section. She fell to the concrete floor near the entrance, as dozens of customers stepped on or over her in their rush to reach sale items. Store employees and some customers attempted to assist Dorothy, but the crowd density prevented immediate access to her location. She remained on the floor for approximately 3 minutes as the surge continued. Emergency responders were called at 6:04 a.m. and arrived within 8 minutes, but Dorothy had already lost consciousness. The coroner's report documented multiple blunt force injuries and asphyxiation as the primary cause of death, with additional trauma such as rib fractures and internal bleeding consistent with trampling. Dorothy was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital a short time later. Investigators later concluded that inadequate crowd control and excessive density at the entrance contributed to the fatal surge. The retail chain operating the store faced scrutiny for its handling of the event, and a wrongful death lawsuit resulted in an undisclosed settlement. The company also introduced updated entry control procedures and additional staff training to prevent similar incidents. It was April 18, 2017, on Highway 101 northbound near San Jose, California. Traffic moved at normal speeds during the 3:45 p.m. rush period, with drivers unaware that a truck's unsecured load was about to spill across multiple lanes. Patricia Santos, 33, was a dental hygienist driving to pick up her twin 8-year-old sons from after-school care. She had left work 10 minutes late due to a patient emergency and was traveling her usual route on Highway 101 in her 2014 Honda Accord. Patricia had made this drive hundreds of times over 3 years without incident and was listening to her son's favorite radio station while planning to stop for ice cream as an apology for being late. Patricia maintained a normal following distance as she traveled in the right lane behind a commercial truck carrying construction materials. The drive was routine, with her seatbelt fastened and no distractions aside from the radio. She had no indication that the truck's cargo was unstable or that debris could enter her lane. The traffic conditions that afternoon carried inherent risk due to the presence of commercial vehicles with varying load security standards. The truck ahead of Patricia was carrying loose bricks in a flatbed with inadequate containment, allowing the load to shift when the vehicle hit roadway imperfections. Highway 101's surface conditions included several potholes that could destabilize poorly secured cargo. Patricia's speed of 65 miles per hour meant any sudden obstacle would allow minimal reaction time. According to accident reconstruction specialists and witness statements, Patricia was traveling normally in the right lane when the truck ahead struck a deep pothole at 3:52 p.m. The impact sent several bricks into the air and caused the unsecured load to spill across the roadway. Dashboard camera footage from a vehicle in the adjacent lane shows bricks scattering across multiple lanes as Patricia immediately applied her brakes. A 5-pound brick struck Patricia's windshield directly in front of the driver's seat, penetrating the glass and striking her in the head. She lost consciousness instantly, her foot remaining on the accelerator as her vehicle drifted toward the concrete median barrier. The Honda struck the barrier at approximately 60 miles per hour and rolled twice before coming to rest upside down. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes and used hydraulic rescue tools to remove Patricia from the overturned vehicle. She was transported to a nearby trauma center, but was pronounced dead at 4:31 p.m. The coroner later documented severe traumatic brain injury as the primary cause of death, with additional cervical spine fractures and internal injuries consistent with a high-speed collision. Investigators concluded that the truck's cargo had not been secured to required safety standards, allowing the load to shift when the vehicle struck the pothole. Following the incident, the trucking company faced citations for improper load securement and was required to implement enhanced cargo inspection protocols. Patricia's twin sons waited at after-school care until 7 p.m. before staff contacted emergency contacts. The boys were subsequently raised by their maternal grandmother, as their father had died in a workplace accident 2 years earlier. It was February 10, 2018, at a small escape room facility inside a suburban strip mall in Phoenix, Arizona. Evening visitors moved between nearby restaurants and shops, unaware that a dangerous buildup had been forming inside one of the themed rooms. Stephanie Miller, 24, arrived ahead of her friends Micah and Jenna for a birthday escape room session scheduled at 6 p.m. She stepped into the medieval dungeon room first, while staff finished explaining the rules to the others. Stephanie walked toward a stone-textured wall, decorated with chains and lantern props, unaware that the room's ventilation duct, hidden behind those props, had been leaking carbon monoxide throughout the day. Decorative foam panels installed the previous week had blocked the return vent, preventing airflow and allowing carbon monoxide to accumulate steadily. Earlier customers had mentioned headaches and mild nausea, but staff dismissed these comments as effects of dim lighting or excitement. Because sessions were tightly scheduled, the room was never ventilated between groups. By evening, carbon monoxide levels near the hidden vent had reached dangerous levels, creating a concentrated pocket of contaminated air exactly where Stephanie stood. Micah and Jenna entered the room a few minutes later after putting away their belongings. They moved toward the puzzle table on the opposite side, farther from the leak point. The room appeared normal. Fake torches, low lighting, and medieval props, but the air already felt slightly heavy. None of them recognized this as a warning sign. By 6:12 p.m., Stephanie was beginning to rub her temples and slow down while examining props near the wall. Exposure to high-concentration CO caused her to experience confusion and dizziness sooner than the others. Micah and Jenna, positioned where CO levels were substantially lower, only began feeling mild discomfort several minutes later. At 6:20 p.m., Stephanie became visibly unsteady. Security footage later showed her leaning against a chain fixture as she tried to move toward the center of the room. Micah noticed her behavior and asked if she needed a break, but Stephanie assumed she was just lightheaded from standing too quickly. Moments later, she collapsed near the wall where CO concentration was highest. Micah and Jenna rushed to her, but immediately felt waves of dizziness themselves. The rising CO levels were now spreading throughout the room, reducing their ability to think clearly. They attempted to open the entrance door, but both grew increasingly disoriented. Jenna managed to trigger the help button on the wall, though her movements were slow and uncoordinated. At 6:32 p.m., a staff member monitoring camera feeds noticed that none of the three were interacting with the puzzles. Attempts to speak through the intercom went unanswered. When the employee entered the room, they found all three unconscious. Stephanie nearest the leak point, Micah and Jenna farther away but still breathing weakly. Doors were opened immediately to ventilate the space while emergency services were called. Fire crews arrived minutes later and measured dangerously elevated carbon monoxide levels inside the sealed room. All three victims received high-flow oxygen before being transported to a nearby medical facility equipped with hyperbaric treatment. Stephanie never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead shortly after midnight due to severe carbon monoxide poisoning. Micah and Jenna survived but required extended treatment and months of rehabilitation to recover from the effects of hypoxia and carbon monoxide exposure. Investigators later confirmed that a faulty exhaust line on a gas-water heater and a blocked return vent had allowed carbon monoxide to accumulate throughout the day. The facility's operators faced civil liability for failing to maintain safe ventilation, and a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Stephanie's family resulted in an undisclosed settlement and mandatory safety upgrades before the venue was allowed to reopen. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.